Hey folks! The Marketplace has initiated launch procedures on the 2021 April sale, and this month's deals are literally out of this world. Save big on rockets, sci-fi space environments, intergalactic tunes, and discover a galaxy of other products 50% off during the sale. Head over to the Unreal Engine Marketplace to explore the cargo on sale through Friday. You can render realistic hair and fur faster than ever with Unreal Engine. Comb through our new white paper to learn about the advanced real-time tools that make it all possible, as well as case study examples from MetaHuman creator and Meerkat, the stunning animated short film from Weta Digital. Download Grooming for real-time realism via the Unreal Engine feed. The Unreal Fellowship has helped over 300 industry professionals in film, animation, and VFX learn Unreal Engine and develop a strong command of state-of-the-art virtual production tools. When the program started, they had no Unreal Engine experience, but now the results speak for themselves. Visit our YouTube channel, where we've shared a glimpse of some of the incredible projects from the first 4 cohorts, the next generation of creators in the emerging field of real-time production. When Volkswagen needed an innovative way to create a commercial for its new electric SUV, it opted to bring the location to the car rather than taking the car to different locations. Race over to our latest spotlight to find out how virtual production unlocked faster, greener, more cost-effective automotive solutions for VW, making it the right choice for its new electric SUV. For students of biology, there's nothing quite like hands-on experience, but recently that hasn't always been an option. Discover how the Carolina Biotechnology Simulator is offering a learning solution that's the next best thing to a fully stocked lab. Now on over to our top weekly Karma earners. Many thanks to Everynone, Clockwork Ocean, Crewdimer, Nacho Monkey 2, Grumble Bunny, Churr, CZ, CG How, Static Void LOL, and Shadow River. First up in our community spotlights is this Lava-Lee piece, The Lost Idol by Simon McDonald. Head over to Simon's ArtStation page to explore their workflow and see how they iterated to bring this volcanic scene to completion. Next up from Destiny Bit, Dice Legacy is a dice-based survival city builder set on a mysterious ring world. Roll and use your dice to gather resources, expand and defend your settlement, survive the winter, and interact with the strange inhabitants of this eerie world. Dice Legacy is coming soon to the Epic Games Store. And last up, a beautiful third-person open-world adventure, Elements. Go in search of 8 elemental stones scattered across a fantastical world to uncover magic and mystery and restore balance to both the elemental world and ours. Wishlist Elements on Steam today. Thanks for watching this week's News and Community Spotlight.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I'm your host, Victor Broden, and today I'd like to introduce, for all of you who should know him, please welcome back Alexander Pascal, Unreal trainer.
Hey everybody, it's me, Alex.
It's him, Alex. He's
I don't know. I have long hair now, you know. It's me. I miss the show a lot. Thank you, Victor. You've been doing an amazing job. I know I saw you. I've been on the show like one other time with you, and that was about it. But yeah, this is for Googly today, right? So let's. I guess, are we hopping into it? Should I switch over to the thing, or what you want to do?
Switch over. You got the floor. This is your time to shine.
All right, let's do this. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with this concept, googly eyes are a idea. If you take a human eye and you took the pupil and I guess everything else of it, everything but the white of it, and you just kind of took the idea of it and said, what if physics didn't make sense and it just went everywhere instead? So what we have here is googly eye. This is not something I just made up and I'm just showing you. This is from our tutorial series that just recently came out on April 1st. Everybody messaged me and said, this isn't real, is it? You just made this up. No, it is quite real. This is downloadable. You can go onto, sorry, you can go onto our learn.unrealengine.com or our online, our Unreal Online Learning portal through the unrealengine.com webpage. And yeah, you can just download these right out of the marketplace. They'll give you a code and you'll get this eyeball and this little scene here. But this is it. This is our little setup. 1 second.
We pasted the link in chat for everyone if you want to go ahead and do the course. Today we're going to be. That's okay. We're going to cover a little bit of the finer details of the tutorial that Alex produced.
Yeah.
And, go ahead, have a sip.
No, yeah, I was gonna say just 1 second. So we got into this. I was all ready, and then I'm like, so. Oh my gosh, this is delicious kombucha. So
you're welcome.
Yes. So we've got a couple of objects in here. Mostly what this does surround is this one asset. It's a very, very simple skeletal setup. I'll just open up really quickly what it actually is. Over here, you'll get an eyes folder. But really, you can make this at home. I actually remade this 100 different times. I made this in Blender and Maya 3ds Max because it's literally 2 cylinders that I then combine, and I put one simple bone structure in there. And let me show you the bone structure, and I'm also going to show you a cool trick while I do this. So if you go into any skeletal view here, where we have the skeletal mesh viewer that we're in, you can go to the little character drop down here, and then under bones, you have the option to see the whole hierarchy. Words, can't words today. Whole hierarchy, or only what you have selected in the hierarchy menu. And if you hold holding shift and left clicking them, I now get a quick hot tab there. So if I hold shift and left click selected only and all hierarchy, I can easily flip between the two. And look at all hierarchy. That's all of our bones. That's it, that little tiny white speck right there. And it's really just saying that on one side of it is the white of the eye, which doesn't move ever inside of this. And then the other thing just needs to be attached to it in some way. And that's that cylinder here, which is the pupil. As you can see, I even made them like tube materials and stuff. Nothing fancy here. It took me forever to learn Blender smoothing groups because I was trying to learn Blender while doing this. And then that was fun. And then the other side of it is just the control rig side. I take those 2 pieces of data. We know that there's a root, there's a pupil, and then we manipulate these using a delay, basically a little bit of an offset, which is what we're looking at in here, using this little Verlet bit of math. So that's the whole entirety of what we're really looking at. And inside of it, there are 2 versions where I also added an aim version where it also has an aim control. Try to make that bigger. There we go. So what's going to happen is on one of them, you can actually select the aim control and look around, and it's doing this thing now, of course, because I think, yep, there's a somewhere in this, I guess that one got disconnected, but that should be fixable because that's just pupil. Oh, and then that one gets rotated. So it looks like one of my numbers in this one must have gotten messed up. So heads up, everybody. You can probably just come in here and then fix the axis. So it's probably just not 0 here. It's probably 1 on Y. Haha.
If you do download the project, here's the fix to the project.
Yeah, and then the secondary has to be fixed too because it's an aim. I explained all this in the long form one where this is not an issue. So somewhere that got translated wrong. So sorry, I checked this one before and everything was wonderful, but I just opened the aim assuming that one would have a broken thing. Sorry. So if that does happen, you just need to flip the axis X to Y. So let's actually talk about what's going on in here. I have this really cool control rig thing. If you've not had a chance to check out any of our past live streams where we have, actually we've had like just about everybody in the crew from the control rig side come in and talk about very advanced control rig concepts. The entire purpose of this one wasn't to show people something that was really advanced, like what theirs are, full body rigging, things like this. It was to show off Verlet, which is a very underutilized, in my opinion, little function, and to show off how you can do some basic, very, very basic stuff in control rig while simultaneously making it fun and silly. So everything is just based off of that concept. It's just 2 simple bones. And then we've pre-enabled control rig. If you're doing this at home, you're going to have to go to your plugins tab, and you're in 426, plugins, and you're going to go into control rig here. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to access any of this. Currently, it's in beta. We're working really hard on control rig. I'm sure you've seen all the cool updates. If you're on 425, jump into 426 because it's massively different. It's getting a lot of new features. But yeah, that was kind of the purpose of the whole thing. And the reason that I'm here on the live stream isn't just to like promote it. I wanted to talk to you about why I made some decisions in here and what trickery I've done, because it's game development. There's always some lies and trickery in here. And so I want to explain all these little parts. So let's break it down. When I do the tutorial, I kind of explain very flatly, like, you do this, this is why. This one's straightforward here. If you're looking at this with me, and you haven't ever opened up control rig before, let me just kind of explain. What we're looking at in these pre-made assets is it's telling it wherever this eye transform, which is this ring, this little red ring here, that's our control, wherever that goes, the bone for the origin is going to follow it. And that's like the simplest little FK kind of solver you can do. You can just say, make a very direct one-for-one. Here's a control. Make it match up to whatever the bone says. So that's an FK solver. And then over here, we have a little pupil offset, where all I'm doing is I'm telling the, the pupil to set itself to match the rotation and scale of the eye transform. But the actual location of it is very, very unique. So this is the only thing that's different, is this is a hard setting, but instead of it setting to exactly where something is, we run it through a quick little function here. Now in 426, we do not yet have the ability to collapse down functions we've built inside of Control Rig. But we also have this new thing, this My Blueprint tab here, and I wanted to show it off to you as like a future concept. So if you do have something like this, where I've set up a little bit of functionality that I'm about to explain, you could in the future, future thing coming, not saying it's coming in the next build, but in the future, I know that they have concepts of additional graphs, functions, macros within here that you can collapse to. As of right now, this is my warning. I'm not bringing this up to say look out for it in the future. I'm actually saying as a warning, you can't collapse things as of right now. You'll see you have your rig graph. There is no new graphs. Right click isn't going to give you your standard blueprint options. So for now, this is how everything has to be presented. But get used to seeing this new My Blueprint menu. If you're coming from 425, this is really new. It's also where you can add in variables. And I wanted to bring up a couple of things here. Like I had people messaging me a lot. I want to make sure I clarified some stuff here. You can make variables and change the Verlet strength of the eye here and like the blending strength and actually drive that in Sequencer. There's an easy way to do it in Sequencer. There's a better way. There's an easier way to do not easier. There's an easy way to do it in Blueprints and an easy way to do it in Sequencer. I'll show you some Sequencer tricks and how to access variables through Sequencer here. But basically, that's what I got all the questions about. Is people would say like, "Oh, I want to make these change in real time." They'd come in here and add a variable. This is actually your Blueprint variables. This is different than if you wanted to make an easy to access variable inside of a sequence. So these are going to be something you access more in Blueprint. To do it in Sequencer, my first piece of advice is you can actually make a control and make the control turn into a variable that is then accessible in Control Rig by a Sequencer. So that was one of the first things I got a lot was I want the eye to fluctuate its bounciness. So in some scenes I can be more serious, but when the character rapidly turns their head, I can crank it up or down. And so that's what I would suggest. And we'll play around with that concept right in here. Now, what else is going on in here besides taking the locations and slowly changing them is we're saying, where is the pupil at its current position? And then we run it through this little bit of relay, which I'll explain why that does that. And then we're also clamping it based off of the root position. So these clamps are actually creating the shape of a very, very flat cylinder. So it creates like a disc shape that the eye can clamp to. So the pupil can clamp to. So the idea here is like, we don't want this pupil disc to bounce outside of the white of the eye. So I'll change my debug here. Oh, yeah, turn it off there. There we go. So basically, when I grab the outside edge here, this little outer control here, I should be able to bounce the eye all over the place. It goes all over, etc. Change out that bone stuff like I told you, so I don't have to look at bones. There we go. So it bounces all over. What it's doing is it's saying, okay, we take the root, which is that white of the eye, and it's saying, okay, whatever position it's in, whatever direction it's in, take that full transform data and shape this clamp to face this space information, essentially. And then the pupil is really just trying to keep up. Like it says over here, the pupil's just trying to keep up with wherever the eye transform is. But Verlet is coming in there and it's basically just slapping it around and slapping it around and smacking it in every way it can. It's not really moving it as much as it's delaying the movement and changing how it moves. So that's really what's happening. The backbone of this is this little bit of physics math. This is real physics math, which is why I cannot explain it. Because I am an artist and an animator. So I'm not going to sit here and try to explain to you the actual Verlet physics math. Go on Wikipedia. That's a fantastic article explaining it. But what it does give you are the actual inputs that are going to modify it. And you can come in here and talk to Unreal in a very serious way. Like, oh, okay, The strength, dampening, and blending all apply in different ways to how quickly the eye is going to either get offset or return to its original position. So if I turn the blend here, so let's like really explore this. If I turn this blend up to like 10, the eye should catch up to itself. The pupil should catch up to itself pretty quickly, so it doesn't bounce as far out. It's harder for me. I have to really shake it hard to get it to bounce anywhere. If I turn the blend to 1, we're going to watch this thing get really drifty. It's like, whoa, 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 wow. Sound effects are actually included in Unreal Engine. I'm not doing that. I swear that's part of Unreal. Whoa, whoa, whoa. So what that is we're basically telling it to blend back to its original position. How much blending is applied per second. Perfect description there, small descriptor. Don't even have to do any more job. Basically, what it's really saying is the amount of time and how long it's going to get back are based off of these. So this is how many times per second it's going to attempt to push it back to where it was. So if I crank it up to 100, we're basically never going to see it move. Yeah, it doesn't really. Nope. So what people kept asking me is they're like, I did the tutorial and then I put my eye in something and I didn't get the results you had. And I'm going to tell you why. Is because the results I got, what you're really seeing is I threw in the third person character in here. So there's my beautiful Manny. Everyone loves Manny. But when Manny runs, Manny just throws his head all over the place, and these are socketed to follow that. So what's happening is, let me crank on the auto possess. There we go. So what's happening is he seems like it's like, yeah, the eyes barely move now, but look at how much really the sockets they're attached to move. And when his head moves, they go everywhere. So as we crank those up and down, you see this is terrible. I've cranked them down so low that it's just going to like click, 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 do this really terrible clicking thing. So actually, the more that your character might move in real time, you actually want to crank this up. So 10 might look a little bit more okay for a character who's really bouncing. So you remember it took me a lot of work to get him to bounce earlier, but this character's head is moving so much when he animates, and that's what we're seeing. So it's up to you how you want that to feel, but just know that that blend is part of it. Dampening and strength are going to be more like, you're going to see a lot more like waving them into place. Let's crank the dampening up to like 0.5 and look at that compared to a regular bounce here.
And
so you see,
this node would be good to use for sort of any like jiggly like physics, right? That is added to, whether that's like dangly bits, hanging from clothing or.
Actually, this is a good point. This is a good point to say. No. Actually, it could be. You're right. It could be. However, it's about stylization, because this is something that people ask me. Say, "Oh, for dangly bits, yes, to a degree." But watch this. If I move the eye to the left, watch how it doesn't bounce back to the right. It goes back to its original position. So it doesn't have the physics law, whichever one it was, because I'm not a physics guy, I'm an artist, dude. So whichever physics law was, it's like, every action has an opposite reaction. They figured it out. Some scientist guy back in the day. I'm not going to try to remember who that was even. But essentially, this doesn't actually have that final reaction. It just goes back into a point over time. So there were actually a few people asking about that. You could really see it when I changed the dampening. But what you're really seeing there, that bounce back, it's trying to get back in there. So yeah, when you're doing it, you have to be careful. You have to kind of know where you're going for. The other option, if Verlet is going to do that, see how it did like that weird thing where it's not really, it's always going to come back to that. It's technically not reacting to gravity or physics. And then the more you crank this up, eventually it just doesn't care. So what you should do is, if you want something that's a little bit more physics reactive, like a pouch or something, where this, like if I stand still, the character's eyes go nowhere. Where if you want to be more affected by gravity, you could use spring IKs, or use an IK that's going to involve itself with physics, or you can use my old method. This is actually a newer method, because I wanted to do it with Control Rig. When I did this before, I actually just turned on physics essentially and let Unreal's physics engine essentially bounce it around, but then I had to do it using bone constraints. But this has no bone constraints. I didn't have to set that up beforehand. It's all just done in here. So that's kind of the difference. Is this is good for some things and then not for others. So I it's not a universal yes, but it is a yes for some things, but not others. So like you got to get your dampening right. You have to be okay with it always trying to come back to the center. It doesn't like really click over and then hang out and then roll down or something. So I've seen people pull off physics-based googly eyes also, and I did it myself. So it's doable, and that might be a little bit better for pouches where if the character leans backwards or something, this style would have
good
the
point,
pouch.
yeah.
The pouch would keep trying to lift back into
Yeah.
position at the end, and that's what the problem is. Like if it was a pouch hanging off their thigh and they sat down, the pouch would go from going downwards to like lining back up with their thigh. So up to you. You know, maybe better for jewelry or things that are tighter on the character. But that's the only iffy bit. And then the last here is like the strength. So if I crank that down to half, see, really getting. Actually, let me crank this down to something really small so we can get a good feel of how drifty it'll get. So if you do this where you got like hard drift, let's actually say, keep the damp down. Let's do the blend down. We'll do the strength down. And now we can get a really drifty, like it's not even googly anymore. Like it'll get caught on the end and hang out there for a second before it figures out where it wants to go. So this is actually Verlet physics at its purest, is just understanding this information. And even at this, it eventually comes back and settles into the center. So yeah, it's got its purpose. It's got some really great stuff going on, but it's not like physics. It's gravity driven like you'd be expecting.
So you'd still be better off using a post-process animation blueprint with one of the simulation nodes, or just straight up a physics asset.
Yeah, like that's what I would recommend too. Is use the there is an actual These are my favorite functions in Unreal. I'm going to show them to you right now, and we're going to do the craziest thing. I never did this, and I don't know why. Begin play. All right, everybody, let me introduce you to my two favorite functions when it comes to skeletal meshes that does nothing to do with actual animation. It is set all bodies below simulate physics. Set all bodies below simulate physics. Instead of doing set all simulate physics or set simulate physics, do that. And then we're also going to do set all bodies blend. There we go. Set all bodies physics blend weight. Set all bodies below. There we go.
Is this a shout out to the Drunk Manny stream?
Maybe. the old we've done a few of these actually. So if you're not familiar with what this is essentially Drunk Manny is what we call it. We call it drunk function essentially, is these two combined. And then I can take this bone off here and I can say make literal, just actually get a name value in here, spine underscore 01. Plug that into both, simulate physics blend weight. Let's go with 0.2, see how that looks. So let's see if we can't get Manny. Oh. New simulate spine underscore 01. Wait, if I misspelled something, then that won't work. And also if the physics blend weight isn't right, it won't work. So un momentito.
Yeah, I think he has a physics asset by default, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's got physics. Simulate physics blend weight. You know what? I always do this. I'm like, you can't just do these two. You got to tell him he can ragdoll. You got to come over here and you got to change the collision type also from character mesh to ragdoll. That was it. I'm a big smarty smart. And there he goes. So Drunk Manny. Oof. You know what? I'm gonna move the camera out a bit because he's
and
gonna
with
fall.
The googly eyes. This is awesome.
That's what it hit me, is like we could do Manny with the googly eyes after a couple drinks. Hang on, let's bump him out a little bit. 200 target arm length. That should work better. There we go. Whoa. Manny, no. Oh no. Manny, why? How? So yeah, I made his eyes extra drifty, so they're just going everywhere. So yes, you can basically layer up physics, but if you're talking about making bags and pouches, this is the way to really truly do it, is you make them part of a skeleton and then you use this, and then you can blend in how much physics affects them. Like maybe if I do this, it'll look a little bit
and you can also do it in the animation blueprint as well, right?
Yeah. Actually, this is a function you can call up as long as you can access the mesh, because it's attached. It's part of the mesh component, so you should be able to call up these out of that data as well
I was
inside of
I
there.
was referring to the there's an actual animation blueprint node that would allow you to simulate certain bones on the body as well, and it's running completely in the animation pipeline rather than actual. Yeah, it's still physics.
Yeah,
It's still physics, but
solver's all on the animation side, right?
mhm.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. I haven't
Trying to
used that
remember what the
one.
node is called.
I haven't used that one, but I know what you're talking about. There's so many. I only know this one, so I implore everyone, please go check out the old, very very old Unreal Engine live streams where we have Lena Halper come on, where she invented a lot of these physics concepts, and she's the one who came on and is like, the official term for this is dangly bits. I invented it. She's like so proud of it. Oh, I miss her. She's so great. Uh, but yeah. So yeah. So yeah, that was the majority of things I wanted to talk about today was just around that. Like, I don't know if we've had any questions specifically about do this or try out something and see if it lights on fire or something. But let me try to get back to normal, and we'll see how Manny looks combining up these physics concepts. So yeah, I don't do this in the original tutorial where I'm like, well, what if we what if we crank up the physics on Manny, and what if we yeah, there we go. Yeah, whoa. Oh, I know what I did wrong. I made the blend 10 instead of 5. I just realized it when I was thinking. Yeah, if you crank that 10, blend up to 10, it fixes itself too quickly and it will never bounce. Ooh, 7 might be better. He's a little bit too much there, buddy. So basically, a lot of the tutorial covers, once we do this, I get questions about, okay, this is the real-time concept versus the like linear concept. So we have different ways of accessing information inside of Control Rig in different places. So there's one thing I definitely want to address that's not addressed in the tutorial videos, which was people started taking this eye here, and when you attach it to a character and then put it into Sequencer, I think I mentioned it very briefly in the tutorial that I have to manually take the eye and kind of like shake it a bit, because the way that it works is it's looking at the position of the transform, that eye transform, that red ring, and then whenever the transform moves in its perception, when the control rig perceives itself as moving this particular component, then that component will then run through the solver, all this stuff, right? So in the third person character, this is very simple. We have, as I explained in the tutorial online, I'm not going to break down everything going on here, but in the tutorial online, I show you, I'm essentially making little helper objects, these little skill to mesh. Yeah, so we have these like meshes and control rigs, but we also have eye socket items. And what happens is the eye sockets move through space. And then the construction script sees them moving around. Essentially, everything sees it moving around, and the construction script has it mapped. So when they move through space, the blueprint actually updates it, and the control rig sees itself as the control. There it is. The eye transform actually sees itself as moving up and down. The difference here is in Sequencer. When I show you how to do it in Sequencer, I take this character here, which should. I say should. I'm just going to double check to make sure that the sockets are still in place here. Yeah, sockets are there. Basically, I threw it in a Sequencer with this character, and Sequencer allows you to easily attach a control rig to another skeleton via their socketing and via an attached track. So I just do that. But when you do this locally, the control rig doesn't see the rigging as moving. So what I have to do is, whenever the character moved, I had to shove the rings in a direction like that to actually move the eyes. So when you see the meerkat running around and its eyes sometimes move around a lot, and sometimes they kind of like shift slowly, it's because I'm actually like manually doing that. Because in Sequencer, it's much more of a manual control thing versus in Blueprints, you're just trying to let physics figure out what direction you're going in. So in this instance, let me just add a level sequence real quick. content, new level sequence. I'll call this one example level. Hit save. And I'm going to throw in, well, let's throw in this character first. Let's add in this mesh. So I'm going to click on track, add actor. This is the SK mannequin female. And what was the name that was decided upon for this character? Polygon or something like that? Because it was Mannequin.
I don't know, actually.
We gave everyone like kind of pseudo names because they all have their real names and they have like fake ones. All right, so I'm going to throw the googly eye on here. Oh, and this was another fun thing. People were like, the googly eye, it's enormous. Like, yep, technically the eye itself is, and then it reshapes itself to the socket scaling. So that was another fun one. So sockets can scale and set things up like that. So I'm going to just add this actor to sequencer, and I can drop in this and add it in as control rig. So we've got the mannequin female. I dropped in my control rig, but let me see if maybe if I close it, reopen it. Googly eye control rig animation transform. Okay, well I'll just add the control rig track to it. Control rig, asset based, control rig. There we go. And then the mannequin female here, I'm just going to add in, oops, actually it's on the eye. I have to add in an attach track, attach to the female right eye socket. There we go. So it inherits all of these offsets and all this other stuff. So like the first thing you want to do is negate all of its offsettings. There you go. That's right, I had to change the scaling in the sockets later on and then change it within here. So you might change the scaling in here as opposed to in the blueprint. I do it somewhere inside the construction script to like shift it and move it around. So yeah, we can add it in here. We can scale it a little bit and see if that, whoa, I was grabbing the wrong character. I'm so sorry, Manny. There we go.
He always gets the short end of the stick.
There we go. So it can still be an enormous eyeball. So it'll attach. I have this habit of making my attach tracks longer than they need to be. Cool. So yeah, at that point, you attach any kind of animation to this character, and you'll notice that she can run through the animation, but the eye does not react. So this was an important point I wanted to bring up, is that in the tutorial, I kind of mentioned that you have to actually do something to like jostle it around. So this is what I mean, is you want to come in here and grab the actual control rig ring. And since it doesn't see this is different. It's, even though it looks like it's moving through space, the control rig ring, this just transform ring, doesn't see itself as changing distance from the root of itself. So it's not really transforming. So what you can do is you can grab it and you grab just the eye transform itself. And I can come in here and I can hit S. And then whenever it does anything, like maybe the head moves forward a little bit, and then I can kind of shift it. Ooh, turn off snapping. Snapping bad. I can shift it slightly one way, like that. And now it's going to move. But it's very subtle. But I actually did move the transform ring in order to do that. So that's how I actually managed to do a lot of the metahuman stuff and a lot of other stuff. So actually not the metahuman, but the meerkat. So it depends on how you do this. If you add this in as a separate track and its own googly eye control rig, and then you attach it like this, you're going to have to do some manual movement. If you make the control rig component part of the blueprint, and then the blueprint character is what's being animated, then it will work. So that's how I did the metahuman thing. Was I actually did it this way, where I had, if you see the videos, we did a whole thing where like, oh, the metahumans come out and they're like, I am a metahuman, and like the eyes are everywhere. The way that I did that one was actually they are blueprints, and they're already in the sequence as blueprints. So I attached the eyes in the same way I did to Manny here. You can actually copy and paste these. You just have to rotate them again because they're rotated. The sockets are different. And I had to make sockets and stuff. But basically, yeah, those will work in the metahumans. And then as long as they're running through a blueprint, they're going to get all the offsetting from the animations, and they do all that number. So it's quite a bit different. So that's where I did hit some interesting trials. And I've noted that we, in the future, like going forward, it seems like we're only doing a blueprint character with a character mesh and a control rig all wrapped up in the blueprint, and then we're using that in sequencer. So that seems to be like the main technique. Big shout out to Jeremiah Grant, by the way, for clarifying a lot of very interesting points. I believe he's been on the show before.
Yes, if you are curious about more in-depth live streams in regards to control rig, we've done 2 with Jeremiah in the last couple of months. You can go ahead and find them on the Inside Unreal playlist on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. So now that I'm looking at it, because this character is so much more subtle, and this is another thing, because this is so much more subtle, it looks like it's jostling around here because I'm shaking it a lot, but that's just it reacting. If I actually play it, it's moving too slowly. So what you can do is, one, you could stretch things in here, make them a little bit. I'm going to make it unsubtle so we can see exactly how I did it, and then I shrank it down later. Is I do it like this, copy, paste that old frame so it'll bounce. But see, it's like almost too short. So that's when I would come in here and start cranking these numbers down, like the strength, the dampening, the blend. Like I still want the blend maybe at 5, but the strength, I can crank this one down to get it to get further away with less effort. Oh, whoops. I didn't mean to do that. I meant to actually play the sequence. Yeah, so now when it moves all on its own, because I changed those numbers around, the strength being that high, it was keeping it too tight. And so by cranking it down, it'll still get there in the same amount of time, but it gets further away from origin, which is way more what you want. Yep, and then we could mess with the dampening to make it even lower, so it kind of hangs out and gets lost. So I throw an extra 0 in the dampening, because that's how you do it. You either add or remove a 0, right? All right, and I'm gonna bring it back in here. So now it kind of floated around a bit longer. So that's what you're really doing is it's all 3 of these are gonna have kind of similar effects of it takes it longer to get back to the origin, or it can move further away from the origin in the same amount of time. That's what they're all kind of representing. So those were those. I think we had some other notes of stuff I wanted to talk about. It was variables. I mentioned variables. You know what? As long as I mentioned it, let's just show you. I'll show you what I mean, since I was saying I'll do that later. Like we have things in here, like the strength is 10, right? And like I said, I mostly crank that up and down to get the eye to bounce around. So if I move this transform bone out a little bit, give myself some space, what I can do is I can come into the rig hierarchy. I'm going to right click and do new control, and I'm going to make a control that's going to be a variable that I can access inside of sequencer, and I can drive that variable up and down. So I'm going to click on that new control, and I'm going to just call this one let's just call this one bounce strength. Helps if I can. I'm using a keyboard I'm not totally used to. You know how that is. It's like being in another skin.
I got you. The only other mechanical keyboard I had available.
It's a nice keyboard. It's just that like when you try to drive someone else's car the first time, you put your foot on the gas and you're just like, whoa, whoops. Float. There you go. Float. So it's going to be a float variable. It actually won't really exist. We don't have to actually draw it or show it. It's not really going to be a thing. And then so this can be a float variable, initial and current. That's fine. Minimum float 0, maximum float. Let's make the maximum of this float be 300, and that will be its limit. Gizmo enabled, don't need one because it's a variable. It doesn't really need a gizmo. So we can compile and save that. And that's actually how you make a variable that you want to access very quickly in sequencer. Is you make the control type be a variable type instead of just a transform in position. There are other variables that are for accessing in Blueprint though. So you'll notice that it did update. Wow. I don't know if that technically works until I exit and come back in. So let's give it a shot, because I've been told that sometimes it will appear, but it's one of those like visual things. You have to kind of like reload it and let it load in. So that might be the case. So we can see that's bouncing. I'm actually going to do this cool trick where I'm going to make it bounce, and I'm going to show you all. This is my favorite trick. Did you know in Sequencer you can paste while playing Sequencer? So I can literally go.
Keys? You can paste keyframes?
That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, that is what you're doing.
Look at that. So yes, you can actually paste keyframes while it's going through the motions here. So that's all I did. This is actually how I make waving animations. Is I just wave the arm this way and then that way, and then I copy paste. I'm super cheap with making some of these. No, I don't make any official animations for Epic. I mostly just learn how to do silly things and then turn them into more technical talks. On the actual bounce strength, you'll see that it has a variable here that's like a value. What we're going to do is we're going to plug bounce strength. We're just going to straight up go in here and say get control, and we're going to plug in that float value into strength. And by default, it's going to be 0. So when we play it, see, it's like going really weird right now. So we made the strength 0, so it doesn't ever really return home. And so that's what we're seeing here is bounce strength is 0. And then here I can hit keyframe it, so it'll stay 0 there. So those first few ones will be 0. And then when we get up to this end one here, I'll have it gradually increase to 300 or something where it's really going to snap into place. See it snap into place there? So over here, it's getting there, it's getting there, it's getting there. Over here, it's 0, so the ball just kind of stays in place while the the pupil stays in place while the white of the eye moves around it because it has 0 strength. But as it increases over here, you'll see that it's slowly starting to get it back into the center, and then by the time it's here, it's really locked in. So that's how you can. Oh man, it never ceases to be hilarious though. So that's how you can lock in different values and mess with them, or you can access them as variables. So that's a little bit counterintuitive right now, I know, but the team working on it is also aware that it's not exactly the most intuitive. So they've been making it cleaner and cleaner, and things are slowly migrating into a more traditional blueprint method. But for right now, if you just want an easy to access variable, that's kind of like the best way to do it, is just make a control that is of a variable type and then plug it straight into whatever variable you want. So off the top of my head, those were really the things I needed to discuss about this, and otherwise I really just wanted to get ideas, thoughts, and I think we might have had one other note, I don't know, in there.
We were talking about how control rig works as a blueprint component.
Right. That's right. I did want to kind of explore that a little bit because as a blueprint component, as a real-time concept, it actually requires quite a bit of setup. This was something that I bring up in the tutorial series. Again, learn.unrealengine.com. If you're logged in, that'll take you right to everything. Otherwise, you go to our Learn stuff and you go to our online learning channels. But what we actually have to do is we have to tell it that the control rig is actually mapped to the googly eye, because in this, like, look at what this actually is. The googly eye control rig, quote unquote, is actually the googly eye skeletal mesh with a control rig track. Same thing here. This is sorry, his eyes will detach if we're just kind of in preview mode. There we go. So same with kind of what we're looking at here is that the character is actually a series of eye meshes and then control rigs separately. So this is a big important point that is brought up in the previous control rig discussion, where I want to say it was Greg Richardson who did the one about he does the one where you can do like a retargetable.
That's correct. Manny riding the pig with like the gun.
Yes, that's the one. Okay, so that was great. Okay, so you can tell I'm on my A game today. I've been on vacation a little, so my brain's like all of my best friends and the things that they do gone. So yeah, he was on and he did this whole discussion about how he had like Narbash and also he had Manny, and they were like do this jump run thing after they do the pig thing. So you watch it and they do like a pig ride and a bunch of other stuff. But they jump over something. They're all using the same animation. But what they've done is because control rig control rig is even more of an agnostic concept than it's more of a generalized concept than like when we retarget a skeleton and say that the animations can be shared or the meshes can be shared. Actually, all that control rig cares about is really the names of the things it's looking for. So it's like, oh, I'm looking for a control called eye transform. I'm looking for a bone called root. And if you have the same skeletal setup on multiple characters, you could do a solver, which is awesome. That's kind of built like it will first snap all the transforms to reinitialize themselves, like relocalize their transforms to the offset of where the bones are. So if you have a small character and you're like, I need the wrist IK here, so it'll run through like a sequence, and the first part goes click here, and then it will do the IK solver after that. So so it's pretty cool. That's why when you actually add these in, these are two separate objects because it doesn't even know. Technically, I could try to control rig up this to something else. As long as it had the same bones somewhere in its structure, control rig would start trying to mess with them. Might not give you the results you want, but technically you can kind of retarget, but it's not retargeting in that manner. So same thing here in sequencer. When you add in, let's say I drop in just another eyeball. Here's just the skeletal mesh with nothing else. Just the skeletal mesh floating in space. The enormous eye. It always watches. It always sees. But if I go into sequencer and I add in this thing, and instead of calling it googly eye, we're going to call it Jeff. So we'll know that it's a unique item here. So Jeff the eye. I'm going to add actor to sequencer. Add Jeff. There's Jeff. Jeff the eye. And in here, you see it is just the skeletal mesh. Well, this thing here is just the skeletal mesh too. And then you select it and you say add a track for the control rig asset. Control rig here. It's the same concept because these are two separate things. Unreal really allows you to separate these things. I could try to slap on the googly eye control rig on anything else that has a skeleton. It would try to work with it. It doesn't really care what the hierarchy looks like. It just kind of cares more about the names and if they exist within the hierarchy. It can cause you issues if they're not, right. So definitely check out the Greg Richardson live stream for that one.
We've linked it in both chats, I believe. And if not, just head over to the Unreal Engine YouTube page and you can find them in the Inside Unreal playlist.
Awesome. Yeah, those are the ones to check out.
Alex, I want to make sure that I know that you had to cut it a little short today, so I want to make sure that we're not going over time.
Thank you. Yeah, I was going to say, I think unless we've got another question in that list, let's do Q&A and stuff. But yeah, I'm a little bit tight on time. Sorry, guys.
It's okay. Things happen. We have real lives outside of the unreal lives that we sometimes have to deal with. First question comes from Loresh, who's asking, how do you resize control rig gizmos? For example, I have a blend control from 0 to 1, which is tiny compared to most UE characters. And having it go from 0 to 100, then dividing it in control rig is hacky and also makes it harder to drive these from other code in a uniform way.
That's interesting. Okay, so hang on. So the first part of this is about changing the actual transform of the gizmo control here, or
correct?
Okay, so yeah, everything in here. So here's what's kind of interesting about gizmos. So when you're talking about your control, you have a concept of offset, initial transform, and current transform, which are what are the most real numbers that matter the most. Offset transform being where is it located based off of where you told it to be. Initial transform being kind of an offsetting based off of origin concept. And then current transform being where is it right now. But then you have the gizmo transform values down here. There is not currently a way to say like select the gizmo and then use the transform tool here and then manipulate it here. So there's not a checkbox for that yet or something. It's like a known feature request actually. So everything here has to be rather manually typed in. And you have to like come in here and say like, oh, rotate it 90 degrees, whatever, scaling. So either you could fix it here if you're having an issue where your gizmo isn't shaped right, or let me show you something. This is my little friend. So if we go in the right-click menu, we go over to animation, we have the control rig gizmo library, which is literally the static mesh library that you can use to make your own gizmo shapes. So if your control isn't the right scaling or the right shape, and scaling it is giving you wrong results, which happens. It does. Like if I wanted this to be smaller, but I wanted it to still be thick, that would be a little bit difficult to maintain a thickness to the ring while shrinking it. So I might upload a circle ultra thick or something like that. Some more kombucha. So there's basically the two main ways is manually here, type it in, or if no matter what you do, typing in these doesn't fix it, you can always go into 3ds Max, Maya, Blender, make your own gizmo shape, bring it in to a library, and then use that from there. So animation, control rig gizmo library. And then inside of this, it's just going to say, what is the new gizmo? What's its name? And then what is the static mesh? That's basically what matters the most. And then you can add in like other gizmos. So
It's super useful. I didn't actually know about the Gizmo library. It's a nice little tip. There are also plenty of default meshes if you enable engine content in the editor. So you might be able to find something in there that suits your purposes.
There's so many shapes already. The number one that I get requested that we don't have by default is a face, where it's like a they want like a 2D outline of a face with like ears and like a mouth, eyes. So you can do face rigging and then just manipulate that stuff. Like that's not in there. So you can make one of those. But every basic geometry, like you were saying, it's all in here.
Thank you, Alex. Let's move on. Trampathon was wondering if the Verlet node was custom or if it ships with Unreal by default.
Oh, it's part of Control Rig by default in 426 and ahead. It's not something I wrote up myself or anything. Like I said, I'm not a physics person whatsoever, and this is actually a concept that is a ye old like physics concept. It's been around for a long time, which I totally misread it as Vertlet the first time, and I thought it was I really thought that it was Vertex linear interpolate shrunk down, but it's actually some guy's name is Verlet. But I thought it was Vertex linear interpolate, like shrunk down. I was like, yeah, perfect. That's exactly what that does, right?
Next question comes from you can have a sip while I ask the question. Looked like you were ready. Next question comes from Uris999. They're wondering, and I think you covered this, if you're able to expose control rig variables to sequencer.
Oh yeah, that's where I I said right in here you can just make a new control, and then what you do is you tell the control that it's not a control type of transform, which is the default. You'll see it say transform. Click on that drop down and change it to the variable type you actually want. My blueprints version of variables is for blueprints. That's actually kind of a tricky thing. So I got frustrated when I was first learning this. I was like, why are there these two things? Blah, blah, blah. So they're making these a little bit easier to understand in the future. Yep.
See, Sir Voxlaw is wondering, is it possible to export control rig keys and then import them into another project?
Control rig keys? Like the keys that we did in here?
Not sure. Perhaps they were wondering about the sequencer keys.
Yeah, if the question is in sequencer, the answer is I think yes. Actually, you should be able to migrate your entire sequence from one to the other. At the worst case scenario, best case scenario, I'm not sure because Unreal does keep a lot of interesting information if you copy it. So I know I can do it like within the same project. So worst case scenario, you could always take the sequence. Right-click it, choose Asset Actions, and then migrate. You can migrate the whole sequence over. Then you can definitely copy-paste the keyframes. But I'm pretty sure you can copy-paste keyframes across projects. You know what? You know how we can tell? Is I can make a notepad note. Hello, sorry. Make a notepad note, and let's see what that actually stores in it, and then I'll be able to tell you definitively on the spot. No, I don't think. It might not be something you can just copy paste across projects, but you should, if they're in the same thing, you should be able to copy some information. It depends on them too, because some of these are transforms and some of these are floats. So yeah, there's some things you can copy and some things you can't. So there might be some limits you bump in there.
Next question comes from Ben M. Kiv. Not sure we're able to answer this one, but they're wondering if there are any plans to get control rig graph more organized. For example, collapsing nodes to functions and splitting setup, reverse forward solve to different graphs. Like Alex mentioned earlier, the tool is in beta. It's still under development, and I'm sure we will see some quality of life improvements coming to it in the future.
Yeah, that was I did kind of mention, like, I can't say when exactly, but I wanted to show you that there's some preset up here for that. You can see where it has the pluses, but they don't work. But you can see there's rig graph. There's not an ability right now to do anything but variables, but that is a future planning, like quality of life. Yeah, like all this relay stuff down here. Like this is something I should be able to go right click, make function out of, or something like that, right? Or a macro. Um, so yeah, like I know that those are planned features. I don't know how far out they are. I've used future versions of Control Rig, and it's very impressive. And I can't say anything more about it.
End of story.
Yeah, end of
Next
story.
question.
It's
Next question comes
extremely
from
impressive.
Dr. Petrichor, who's wondering, does Control Rig play well with Niagara so you could utilize particle attributes with interactive animation information or vice versa?
Through a blueprint, you should be able to share a lot of that info, but it's going to come down to something in blueprints, I think, where you're going to have to tell it, like, we're sharing a socket or we're sharing some kind of information. Because that's where I think this is probably the best way to do that is in my example here, these things which are called eye sockets are actually just scene components. So I added scene components and then I attached those to sockets, and then I could make other things follow them or use their data, or I could use the data of the sockets. So the control rig information in here is just bone position solvers essentially, and so if you're using this, it's going to move any sockets that are following those bones. So if you have a fully control rate character doing like combat fight stuff, you can make that a blueprint essentially, attach the particle effects as part of that character. And you could do things in here solver wise actually to say, like, the Verlet has a velocity information thing here, and say if the velocity goes over this amount, we can create a branch in here. It's like like a little branch. I didn't mean to actually connect it. And you could say, yeah, if the velocity gets too high, flip a switch, and then you can also make variables like if they flip in here, sequencer, you can have sequencer read it, and then you could have sequencer like enable the particle effect or anything like that. There's a lot of ways you can access it. You probably have blueprints read those variables, and then if the velocity goes over an amount on some punch, then yeah, it gets fiery or something like that. But yeah, that's a lot of communication. It's totally doable, and if you want to do stuff like that, what I would recommend is you check out the new control rig tutorials that just came out about getting the control rig in a blueprint and having the character walk and do the like foot placement IK, because it does a lot of that communication stuff in there, which I think we just put that on YouTube. So I had to remember because Andreas's thing.
All right. Last question of the day here comes from Robert Garcia, who's wondering about control rig and retargeting. Will it enable the possibility to retarget animations at runtime between different skeletons, like a master pose component?
Oh, interesting. So okay, this is why you got to check out that other live stream too, where you have Greg explaining his thing a bit there. With control rig, you could have it see that they're, like I said earlier, it's not really retargeting, but it's actually looking at the bones, and then you can actually have it say, find that bone, and then change your initial position to wherever it is. So that's probably reread the whole question again. I want to make sure I'm answering this right.
Will it, about control rig and retargeting, will it enable the possibility to retarget animations at runtime between different skeletons, like a master pose component?
Runtime. Oh man, runtime. I don't think so. The retargeting system doesn't really have I don't think you can like spawn a skeleton then retarget it on the spot. This would actually be interesting because this one, as long as the bones are the correct naming, you could, I guess, in runtime attach a control rig component. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, now that I'm thinking about it, you might actually have something there. At runtime, you could attach a control rig component to a blueprint and also a skeletal mesh to that same blueprint, and through some various function calls, have them bind to each other. It would take a lot of setup so that your actors would be pretty ready to do this, but you could do that and then have it so that they snap into position. And so instead of retargeting the skeletons, you have control rig retarget itself just based on bone name and position. So yeah, check out the Greg Richardson live stream where he talks about his kind of like auto stuff that he had set up for that. And then also think about, like you're going to have to just set up functions in advance that will say, do this binding stuff that's in construction script here. And then you're going to have to do some stuff that's in, I show it off in here. There you go. Some of the actual like set initial transform stuff. So yeah, it's doable. You'll just have to call up these functions at runtime to make sure that things do attach, as opposed to doing them here in construction script.
Awesome. I said that was the last one, but we have one more from Elfidio Rubio, who's wondering, and if you can share, Alex, what can we expect in terms of learning content coming to the online learning from you, Alex?
From me personally, I've got nothing currently planned, but I have a couple of things on the back burner. I'm actually actively a trainer at Epic, so my primary work is to do kind of hands-on tutorials with our users, our clients. So a lot of my time is spent doing live sessions and not so much the recorded ones. But that's not to say that my wife doesn't actually literally have some say in actually what goes on in that portal, because Kate actually works on that side of things, and she's the one who approached me one day and is like, Alex, somebody on Twitter, I think it was Deepak, someone on Twitter saw my Googly Eye tutorial that I had just made a series of tweets, and then she's like, yeah, we want to make a full tutorial out of it. Are you interested? I'm like, yeah, of course. So that's why this exists, is literally like a couple people thought there's something I said was funny, and then they're like, make a tutorial out of it. And so I'm thinking that I'll probably do some more things in the future, but my style is definitely to make things as weird and wild as possible. So whatever I make next will probably be on the same level of either this or Chance Ivy's cat gun or one of those other kind of wild ones. I've got a couple of ideas, but it mostly involves future tech that I can't really talk about yet. So
awesome. Alex, thank you for coming on the stream today to talk a little bit about us. But Googly Eyes, it's been a pleasure. And you did get to drop a very long sort of back in time reference to the Drunk Manny stream. I remember watching that when I was learning Unreal Engine, and I was utilizing physics profiles, physical profile. Yeah. Which is what you and Ian Shadden, that was Ian Shadden, right?
It was Ian, yeah, because Ian and I would just show up on streams, and I would tell him a joke before we open up the stream, and then we're both laughing really hard, and he's like, oh, we have to do the thing. And so we did that one where it was the drunken like stuff, just talking about physics. There's another good one like that where Wes Bunn does a character who like falls over and then picks themselves up in a natural way, picks themselves up. So
which is a good effect if you have sort of you get exploded or something and characters fly away, and then there's zombies like coming back up. Yeah,
no one likes to see a character that's like all ragdolled and suddenly they just reconstitute themselves straight up. So yeah, he had some like nice, they like push themselves up and all that.
I think he used two different ones depending on if they were on their back or their belly as well. Yeah,
he does like a line trace thing. God, whoa, it's weird how much I watched that tutorial so many times. I've like memorized chunks of it. Yeah, he does like a line trace and a line trace. Yeah, those are good times. Ian's actually still local. I should go ping him now that you said something. I'll see how he's doing. Gosh,
possibly sometime in the future when we're able to actually do meetups in Raleigh again, might be able to get some of the old folks together. That'd be fun.
Because we used to. If you're not familiar with the meetups and stuff out here, whenever those are available again, we'll make sure that I'm sure whoever will be out here, Victor, whoever will be saying, come out, and I'll make sure to show up to them too, and we'll say hi to everybody. So.
On that note, if you are interested in local meetup groups around you, even though none of them hopefully are doing any in-person meetups right now, they do host virtual meetups on Discord and other various video call platforms. You can go check out communities.unrealengine.com and see if there is a local group in your area. If there isn't one, and you and a couple of friends or just you are interested in sort of organizing that, there's a button in the top right that allows you to fill out a form, which get you in touch with us so that we can take a look at spinning up a meetup group in your area.
And that's how you can get Victor's email address.
Well, I mean, we are pretty open with community@unrealengine.com. It's also where you can send us questions in regards to that if you have any before you want to fill out the form. But the form is a good way to sort of get in touch with us and we know what it's about. But yeah, you were asking me earlier this week, I think, like, hey, do we have a good email? And it's community@unrealengine.com.
Community@unrealengine.com is for your general needs. Because someone had just asked me like, hey, can I talk about setting something up? And I was like, Victor, my man, my dude, guy.
Awesome. Thanks everyone out there for hanging with us today. I'm gonna do ahead and drop a couple of links and names in chat. Make sure that you visit UnrealEngine.com if you're interested in getting started with game development with Unreal Engine. You can just download the Epic Games Launcher, and you got the latest version of Unreal, including the marketplace, available right there. There are, I don't even know if I want to say thousands, but there's definitely many hundreds of free assets available in the marketplace that you can use to sort of kickstart your development. If you're not an animator and or modeler and or technical artist, there's plenty for you to download and play around with. We do go ahead and transcribe all of our live streams. The transcript is usually available within 7 days of the time that we go offline. It is manually authored, and so if you're curious about any of the terminology used that we were talking about in the stream, you can go ahead and download that PDF, I believe, PDF or text file. And you can find a timestamp where we mentioned that. You should go ahead and let everyone know. You can do Control F and then search for something. When were they talking about materials again? That one might be a little bit too generic. But if there was anything in particular, you can go ahead and look at that. This also allows you to turn on captions when you watch the stream on YouTube. So when you do go ahead and see a link to the transcript in the YouTube description, that's when we have the most accurate, updated captions available on the YouTube video as well. We do go ahead and enable them sort of just a day or two after, but this is the automated computer-generated transcript that comes back from the software that we use before we have our captioneer, Courtney, taking a look at that and making sure that it's all accurate. Alex, get over here. We do have a survey that we ask everyone to fill out. We'll see. Sky will probably go ahead and post that in chat right now. And please go ahead and let us know what kind of topics you'd like to see us cover in the future, how we did today. And everyone, please go ahead and and wave to Alex, who happens to be in my my office right now. That was the only solution we were able to pull off here today because his internet was not up to par to be able to do this. Mom. And that's also Alex's mom. Who's in the scene. They're about to take off, so I'm going to wrap this up real quick. Make sure that you let us know about all things you're working on in Unreal Engine. It's always a pleasure to see your projects. Like I said, you can go ahead and contact us at the email, but even better is to add Unreal Engine on Twitter, write on our forums, or ping us on Discord, or any of the other places that we are at. With that said, make sure you follow us on social media, hit the notification bell on YouTube, and next week, I'm not able to announce what we're going to cover just yet, but we'll be live Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time as always. And once again, everyone, chat, give it up for Alex for coming on the stream today. Awesome. Take care, everyone out there. Stay safe. We'll see you again next week. Bye.